Alright, it is day 32 and I just shut off the rock tumbler. Got some leakage going on. I'm not exactly sure if the lid came loose or if it actually may have sprung a leak in the thing itself, but that slurry there and whatever's left in here might have the glass frit in it. So what I'm going to do is open this up, try to clean up all that stuff in there, and then put it through a filter of some sort to get the larger particles out. I'll put it through a screen to get the big chunks out, because I'm sure there's still some chunks of glass in there. And I'll put it through a filter to get the smaller powdered frit out, because that's what I want for glazing. So let's see how this goes. Alright, what a hassle. After much tedium, I've got what's left of all the crushed glass. You can see how smooth these pieces are, though. It's almost like sea glass. They've just been rounded off, which is kind of cool. I might find some of those bigger pieces and keep them to make like wire wrap jewelry. And then I've got the nuts that were in there, and they look like they've been sanded, which essentially they have. They've been rolled around in tiny, abrasive glass for about 24 hours. So they've worn down a little bit. So there is some amount of the steel from here mixed in with the frit as well. This is another another example of why I wish I had my scales, because it would be nice to see, before and after measurement of the glass, before and after measurement of the bolts. See which one wore down more of the other, because honestly, the glass could have worn more steel than the other way around. It's hard to know. So this is the sludge, and I gotta tell you, I'm hoping this turns out ugly. I'm hoping that this does not turn into a nice glaze, because the amount of effort to get this just doesn't seem worth it. And if this turns into a really beautiful glaze, that means I got to go through this whole process again, and I really don't want to do that. All right, finally made it to the backyard after being in a garage all morning. So I've rinsed these off, and this is the strangely sandblasted metal. I think so far my favorite outcome of this has been the looks like sea glass, the little bits of glass. So I saved, I don't know, half a dozen of these little chunks to make maybe some wire wrapped earrings, or who knows, or I'll just put them somewhere and forget about them, and until years later when I find them and say, what did I save these for? Alright, but this is what I was trying to make. So this is the finest powder of glass, and obviously some steel in it as well, or iron, if it was rust. But in any case, I'm going to it's very thin, so I don't know if this will even, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's obviously getting something on the clay here. But I'm going to fire this today. I've got the two clay tiles that I'm going to use as shelves that I need fired as well, before I can do the West Virginia pendants raku firing of that. So this may take a lot of coats before I build up a layer that will actually melt. So I'll do that on time lapse, so I don't bore you to death with it. The problem is, when I'm adding more on this, I'm also taking some away as I'm trying to paint it on there. I even tried dipping it. It just doesn't seem to want to build up a big enough layer. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to let this sit for a while and see if it settles out, and then remove some of the water with a pipette. Because none of this is soluble, I can remove the water in this without removing any of the glaze material. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to have to pour it into like a shallow pan and leave it out here to evaporate for a while, and then see if I can pour most of that back. I don't want to do that though, because you know, pouring it back and forth, I risk losing even more of the glaze material, and it didn't really make that much to begin with. So let's hope this settles out pretty well. What are you doing, Wally? What are you doing? Micah's on the phone. That's what you're hearing in the background.
Bigger than McDonald's. Choose the necklace.
I love watching him eat. Nom 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 nom. Enjoy your food, old man. I don't know what 21 is in frog years. Well, it's been settling for quite a while, over an hour. You can see a layer. Let me get close up. You can see a layer at the bottom that looks blue. That is definitely the glass. There's not much of it, but that's definitely the frit. Now this murky layer might have some very finely powdered frit in it as well. Or it could just be the rust and grime from the steel nuts that I had in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pipette all of this off, but I'm going to keep it. I'm going to put it in this bottle and let that settle out. And tomorrow I'll check it. Well, who's being nosy over here? Jack, did you want to look at this as well? He had his nose right up here. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, so I'll transfer this liquid into here as much as I can without disturbing this down here. Then with this layer, I'm going to add a little bit of the Epsom salt dissolved in water to see if I can keep that in suspension. Then paint that onto this test mouse, and and then fire it. Then the liquid that's in here, we'll check on that again in a couple of days and see if it's settled out anymore or precipitated out any more of the frit. So here I go. You know what? I'm going to do this in fast forward so that I'm not boring you. Alright, so this is what we're left with. Not a whole lot. If this turns out to be the only useful part of that process, it's kind of disheartening, because that ain't much. So then replicating this, you know, got to go through that whole process of grinding for 24 hours and then separating out the frit from the chunks of glass, and I don't know guys, but let's at least try it out. I'm gonna try, actually, you know what, I'm gonna wash this and get a fresh test mouse so that, oh, you see how powdery that is. Definitely don't want to breathe that. Get a fresh test mouse, paint it up and put it in the kiln and fire it up. I think it's gonna rain. I had wanted to do a raku today but the weather report looks like rain, so I might do some hand building. I've got some projects that I've been thinking about, so got some more stuff I want to do today. Alright, so I've got my two shelves that I'm firing, and then on top of that, actually I'm just going to move these in towards the center a little bit, just so that if those shelves slump at all while firing, they don't end up falling over. Hopefully, there's a really tight squeeze in there. All right. It is about 1:15. So I'm going to plug in the kiln, let it candle for about half hour, and then fire it. Hopefully get some interesting results. If that glaze does turn into a nice colored blue glaze, then I may have just invented the most inefficient way of making a nice colored blue glaze. If it turns out to not melt at all or not work at all, I'll kind of be relieved, because then I won't have to continue down that avenue, because that was a lot of work. But you know, the small amount of glaze that it made, you know, because of the amount of work that went into it, I would only, if that does work at all, I would only use that for tiny details, you know, like, I don't know, eyes or dots or things like that. So it won't be a total waste, hopefully. Alright, I'm gonna start to get, weather's starting to get cloudier and windier, so I think it's gonna rain. So I'm gonna make some things, do some work in the shed. That way, if it rains, I don't get poured on. And all right, let's get to work. Oh boy! All right. Well, while I was working, I heard a pop, and as you can see, one of those greenware tiles, it exploded. It was a pretty violent pop. So even letting it dry in the sun for a full day and letting it dry, I made that a couple days ago. I thought it was dry, and then leaving the kiln open to let it candle still was not sufficient. Still heated up too quickly. Having it up that high in the kiln probably didn't help. But whoo boy, so that was one failure. And gonna have to let it cool down because it's too hot to touch right now. Let that cool down completely, clean out all the bits, put whatever survived back in there, and try that again. Ugh, what a waste. Oh well. Well, I started by making 2 pinch pots and then putting them together and I wanted to make a brain. And then I found another yardstick. I know it's a yardstick because I found it in my yard. And then with a little bit of carving and sanding and dremeling, I made this little kind of spoony scoopy shape. And that is what I use to make eyes. So now I have a fairly functional eyeball tool, and you can see the way that's done. It's just to press in and kind of rotate on one side, and then press in and rotate on the other side to get the eyeball shape. Then you can use the edges of this for the eyelids, some wrinkles. And then I used a chopstick that I sanded this a little bit smoother. I used that for the iris, and the other side I sanded to a point to make a pupil. And it's kind of a rough way of making an eyeball. And rough, I mean, because you know the iris should be a little bigger. You know, I could spend more time and make this a little better. You know, just like I used my vast knowledge of neural biology to do the brain here, I was just winging it. Got a paper cut. Ouch! I'm bleeding. Medic. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna put some eyes on this brain, like some eye stalks, like it's a slug kind of creature thing, and then I'm gonna give it like feet on the bottom to hold it up because I want it to be real weird. And then I think I'm going to, because this is hollow, I think I'm going to make it into an ocarina. Okay, taking a break from that sculpture for a minute. This tile seems unharmed, and luckily these don't seem to be affected either. And the great thing about this kiln is because it's so small, I can just pick it up and dump it out. So I'm going to do that to get rid of the rest of it, just dump that in the reclaim, why not? And then load it back up and try again. Alright, this time I'm going to leave it all the way open. It's 2:30ish now. I'll leave this all the way open for about half an hour and then prop it open a little bit for another half hour, let it heat up real slow. Kind of paranoid now. Hopefully no more explosions today. Alright, this is what I got so far for this, which is very ridiculous. This brain with eye stalks and feet, and I've got the first 2 finger holes for an ocarina. You can hear that high note's gone though, so I need to let it dry a little bit so that I can refine those edges, make them sharper, make sure everything's nice and tidy and lined up. Now as it's drying, it's wanting to come apart because this is it's got those deep grooves in it which are structurally affecting it. This clay is so weak when it's drying. Really maddening. But nothing I can do but just continue to push clay into the cracks as they form and hope for the best, because this thing is far too weird and spooky and strange and creepy for me to not have it work. So no, this might be an idea better suited for higher quality clay. This local clay is it's almost like the clay they make bricks out of. Not great for these small details and fine pieces that are required for a whistle or an ocarina. But we'll see what it does. We'll hope for the best. So I'm gonna let that sit for a while. Come back here in half an hour, check the kiln, and maybe add some more details to this, and then try to get the last 2 finger holes, because a 4-finger hole ocarina makes a 8-note do re mi kind of scale. So that's my goal for this anyway. It may just end up being a whistle, which is still pretty cool. If it doesn't, you can't play songs on it, but it's still pretty neat. Alright, I finished messing with this while the kiln's cooling. I like the way the eyes looked. I gave up on having a 4-finger hole ocarina though. I just did 1 big hole to make it like a slide whistle, and that works really well. And now that this is drying up, it's a little sturdier. It was like anytime it would slump and move the littlest bit, the clay would crack on one of those seams. And I got to use my new stamp to put my JW clay art there, and I signed it on the bottom of the foot, but it sounds like this. And it looks awesome. So at least there's 1 success for the day, unless this breaks while it's drying, knock on wood. So I'm gonna let that dry and let the kiln cool. This isn't quite cool yet, but it's almost cool. No. I'm getting tired of waiting now. So you can see the one that had the thin coat did not really do a whole lot of anything. The one that had the thicker coat, it's definitely a glaze, but I don't think it's a glaze worth the amount of effort that went into it. Kind of a ugly gray glaze. Perhaps worth looking into a little bit more. It's starting to rain. Look more into that if I find an easier way of making the frit. But otherwise, I'm going to call it quits on that line of investigation. Jack, come on, it's starting to rain. Let's go in the house. Look at him hurry. He is not a fast dog. All right, say bye, kids. Say we'll see you tomorrow on Backyard Ceramics.